Welcome back to the Grappling Growth Podcast with me, Joe Testori. On episode 52 of the Grappling Growth Podcast, I was joined by Ghalib Hassam. He is the founder of a personal branding agency based in Pakistan and has worked in some pretty big and cool agencies all throughout the world. On this podcast, we talk about the motivation and the driving factor from his dad's death as to what's fueled him to driving and growing his own business, essentially a man from Pakistan who's earning $5,000 a month, quitting a job and going all in on his business. I have respect for him because he is beating and tuning to the beat of his own drum, I should say. So listen to this podcast. This is an inspiration from anyone who is maybe suffering from a limiting belief of saying, oh, I'm from so-so country, I can't earn this. He is living proof that you can make money that you put your mind to. As entrepreneurs, we all experience challenges in our business journey. I'm Joe Testori, and the Grappling Growth Podcast is my attempt at documenting my entrepreneurial journey while building my brands. I sit down with fellow entrepreneurs, understanding how they grapple with growth. I hope you find value and enjoy. Ghalib, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Joe. And just happy to be here, man.
You're welcome, man. So I'm curious, what does growth look like in your world?
Well, growth in my world, I suppose there are a couple of answers to this, but for me personally, growth is, I'm the kind of person who, if it gets into a routine, I get bored and it worries me. I get anxiety, right? I'm like, okay, so am I going to have the same routine over and over again? So for me, growth is every single day, getting out of your comfort zone and doing something new, improving yourself. Some people say it's a productivity problem, that you feel like you have to be productive at all times. But on a personal level, I think I need it as a person so that I can become a better version of myself, personally and professionally. And if in terms of a general perspective, growth for me is being able to build a life that allows me to be financially and time-wise free so that I can be with my family, provide for them, while not being constrained to certain aspects. Being in my own boss, basically, I think that could be a way to say it. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but in my opinion, I think that is what growth represents for me.
It does answer the question. Where do you think that mindset stems from, where you don't want to be doing the same thing every single day?
Because I think even if we waste a single minute in our single day, we're wasting life. As simple as that. And I think a lot of it stems from my dad. He passed away in 2016 and it was sudden, right? Nobody expected anything. He wasn't sick or anything. It was a heart attack. So from that very own moment, if I'm not sitting with my family or if I'm not doing something productive personally to get better, I feel like I'm wasting life because we absolutely have no idea if we have tomorrow or not. We could be the healthiest we can be, but something as simple but dangerous like a heart attack could take us away, right? And not just for me, but for everybody around me as well. So if it's not me, maybe it will be somebody else. So if I'm alone doing something that is not productive or not allowing me to spend time with my family, I feel like that is genuinely a waste. And that is, I think, where primarily it stems from.
And I'm sorry to hear about your father. Your dad's sudden death. Did you feel like you had that perspective immediately afterwards, or did it take some time to heal and develop this perspective?
There's still some aspects of it that I haven't healed from, to be very honest. And I think you never really do. It's a learning process and it takes a long time. People say with time you heal and everything's okay. I don't think you heal, but you just get used to all the pain and suffering. You can recover faster. That's how I measure it. So if I was, let's say, sad about something yesterday and I'm sad about it every single day, with time I grow the tolerance. And then even if I am sad, then subconsciously I know that it's going to eventually go away. Sadness, like every other feeling, is temporary. Whether it's happiness, whether it's sadness, whether it's anger, the only thing that we need to be striving for is being content. So I know that it's going to go away. It's a feeling. I don't have to push it away. So yes, my father's death had a huge effect on me. I had to learn and unlearn a lot of things with time. And this whole gaining this kind of a perspective, the one that I just told you about, I think it suddenly hit me like right after him, because I have siblings, right? We are four, so I'm the youngest. But I always felt like I had like a chip on my shoulder that the way our father used to take care of our family, I want to do it, right? Because I want to be able to prove to myself that, yes, I'm capable of doing that because he's not here anymore. Even though I have an elder brother, right? I have two sisters, then it's my brother at the top. But personally, I think it means a lot to me to be somebody who takes care of other people. I think that's in my nature, that's in my personality. So it took not a long time. As I said, it was almost immediate. I just knew that I had to gain this perspective somehow, and I did, thankfully. So I think that is one of the reasons why I look at things the way I do right now.
I get you. I get what you mean. I get what you mean. And that's a lot of responsibility to look to take on as the youngest sibling. And what's the age difference between you and your brother?
10 years. So it's almost 3 and 4 years between each sibling. So my brother's 10 years older than me, then 3 years their sister, 3 years another sister, and then 3 years me. So 10 between me and him.
And between, say, you and your brother, who's at the top, how do you think your relationship and your connection changed, if at all, after your father's passing?
Well, my brother and I, we weren't really, since there was like sort of like a big age gap, and we weren't really super into each other as brothers. Like we weren't like doing activities together and stuff. I think our relationship has transitioned from a stage where everybody was on their own basically, because we were living a free life. Dad, mom, everybody was here, but now we feel like there are certain responsibilities that we both have to take care of. We don't
Hmm.
ask of each other. We don't say like, hey, you have to take care of this or you have to take care of that. Both of us, we just know that some things like they just need to get done, whether it's emotional, whether it's financial, whether it's physical. We know our roles. Like we don't overlap. We don't be like, hey, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. We just understand it, because we know at the core that our dad used to do all of it. Never once did he ask us to do any of it. But now, since he's not here, we morally, it's our responsibility to fill that gap as much as we can. Obviously, we cannot fill that gap for our sisters and for our mother, because you cannot fill somebody's absence, but you can try to be there for your family in terms of whichever they need you to be. So for us, for me and my brother, I think we're just trying to fill that gap in a way that we best can. So our relationship, we were never really the type of brothers who were very open with each other in terms of like being emotionally open, but we understand. So we understand things without even talking to each other. So I suppose that's pretty much it.
I was curious by your response because you mentioned family at the start of this podcast and just before we jumped on air, and it sounds to me that family is sort of your epicenter. It's where everything stems from, and you mentioned that if you're not being productive, then you want to be spending time with your family. And you mentioned that you're a semi-new dad, 11 months
Yeah.
now, which I'm sure is a completely new perspective of love that you're experiencing there. So just kind of arcing that over to business, and you mentioned that you've worked at numerous agencies, Berlin-based agency, British-based agency, Dubai-based agency, and now you're running your own agency, which is amazing. First few months of the struggle, how do you think everything that's happened in your life allowed you to get through the first 5 months where you're thinking, is this even going to work? And how's it looking now for you?
I honestly, to be very honest, I had doubts. I had self doubts and I had imposter syndrome, because it's one thing that you're working with agencies, because then you have all the credibility that you can lend from them. So even if somebody's talking to you, if you're associated with a particular name or a business and they're doing good, people think that you're doing good as well. So you borrow that credibility. But when you're on your own, it's a completely different story. I thought initially, well, I would land a couple of clients within the first or second month, because everybody on LinkedIn, the way they talk about it, it feels like everybody's landing clients left, right, and center. But when you're actually doing it yourself, it's a completely different story. So within the first few months, there were moments I thought it's definitely going to work. There were moments I thought there's no way that this is going to work. So that is why I tried finding jobs as well. We mentioned earlier, right? I tried to find jobs till the fifth one, because I was like, what if this just doesn't work? But I remember my wife and I, we always had conversations about this. And I would tell her, I quit the job, the Dubai role, and I told her I've got a 6 month financial runway. I know that I absolutely have to work it out within these 6 months. If I don't, I can always try to find another job. But in my head, I only have one option, that is making this work. All I ask of you is to be patient, and I'll make things work. And thankfully for me, my mom and my wife, they did understand. They were like, okay, we give you the space, do it, we'll support you. But if it doesn't work out, you have to find a job. And I was like, okay, I completely understand that and I'll do that. So for the first 5 months, Joe, I had zero clients. I thought this was not the right decision because you're always thinking at the back of your head, you left a good salary, but why did you do it? I mean, sometimes people say it is okay to sacrifice your mental health if the pay is good and if you're supporting your family, which is completely understandable. That is why I left a 6 month runway for myself financially, because I didn't want myself to give myself that excuse like, hey, you need to go back because you don't have any money. I stored a bit so that I could actually pursue this full time. First 5 months, absolutely nothing. I had a few sales calls because I thought that spray and pray thing is gonna work. I would call DM a lot of people, and I would I would get on a sales call, right? Every single week I would get at least two or three, and I was like, wow, this business thing is easy, right? Sales calls, at least one of them is gonna convert. None of them did. I was like, okay, maybe I'm doing something wrong. So then I realized something. This cold approach doesn't really work. For you to work with somebody, you have to actually build up trust. Then the funny thing is, the first client that I signed for my business, like after the fifth month, he was somebody I had an initial sales call with. Didn't work out. He said I wasn't ready. Like he said he wasn't ready. He didn't have the finances. And then I reached out to him a couple of months later, again, just to follow up. He said, "Well, I'm not ready yet, but there's a client work that I need to get done. Can you help me out?" I was like, "This isn't for me." But I tried to find somebody for him and put them in touch. So I kind of helped him because I wanted to. He's a nice person. He appreciated it. And then guess what? A week later, he was like, let's work together out of nowhere. So I realized that you cannot just do this cold approach thing. Today's world, people need to trust you in order to work with you. And that is exactly how I landed my next four clients as well. None of them were initial sales, like directly. We had free conversations, we built a bit of trust, and then eventually, when the timing was right, we started working together. So that is how it has been so far. And right now, I'm like approaching my 8th to 10th month, you could say, because when I initially started the business called Bari, my employer back then, Dubai-based agency, I told them like, hey, I'm going to be working with you guys, but I want to like soft launch this. And they were like, okay. But when I made a post about it on LinkedIn, it was a big problem. They basically told me like, you either drop it or you quit the role. I was like, for the first 2 months, I didn't quit their role. I quit my agency instead, Bali. And but 2 months later, 3 months later, I was like, I want to go in full time. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Fair man. And I think what you said about relationship building is so prevalent in business. And I feel a lot of people who are trying to grow businesses, they're continuously looking for the scalable approach. But for the
Mm,
first 10, even 100 clients for most businesses, what you do is unscalable. And I always find that if someone doesn't convert and purchase from you, if your product's not the right fit, then that's fine. But it's either a timing issue or it's a trust issue. If it's a timing issue, there's not much you can do. It's just this does not work. They need to raise investment or they need to be at a different growth phase. If it's a trust issue, then they just don't think what you're offering is good enough for them and you
mm,
haven't conveyed what you're doing. Or, as with a lot of people in the online world, you just don't have the expertise. You're trying to sell something which is 10 times the price point as to what your product actually deserves. And
mm,
I know for myself, I get dozens of people every single month who are messaging me telling me I've got problems within my business, which, yeah, sure, I can do things better, but they don't produce anything or bring anything of value to the table. And then they expect to sell. And I think a big issue with the online business space is that the barrier to entry is down here, whereas for most businesses it's up here or even
yeah.
higher, depending on what you're selling. And it is providing this like really bottom layered approach or opportunity for a lot of people to get into the online space, and people can set up businesses within a few days. And I find it's quite amusing at times because the standard is so low. So to stand
Yeah.
out, it's quite easy. So for you, how do you feel that you're providing an impact or making an impact to the market, and you've got this experience, but how are you conveying that to the market so you can stand out?
Yeah, I always like it's funny you mentioned this because I recently talked about this on LinkedIn as well. If you're trying to work with somebody, like you'll usually come across two types of leads, right? One of them, they are gonna have the money, but they're not going to be in the market to buy at that very moment, right? They're just not, the timing's not right, as you mentioned. And then there's another type of lead. They are in the market to buy, they have the money, but the only differentiating factor this time is trust. If somebody is in the market to buy or not, that's not up to you. You cannot decide that. If somebody has the money or not, that's not up to you either. That's up to them as well, whether they have the funds or not. But trust is in your hands. So you can build that over time. If somebody's into your, let's say, LinkedIn ecosystem, since my business is based on LinkedIn, you can nurture them with content, with conversations, and then with time, if they're ready to buy it, they're going to buy it, is in my case, right? But now, these days, as you said, the barrier to entry is very low. I started my own business, and it was easy, I thought, but it wasn't really with time, and I realized it. And I'm sorry, I'm losing my chain of thought. Can you please repeat the original question?
My original question was, what impact? I guess what's the unique value proposition that your business brings to the market?
Oh yes, apologies. I don't know what happened.
All good, man.
So, so my value proposition is very simple, right? You give me 2 hours worth of time every single month, and I'll give you content for the whole month. Usually, what happens is agencies work with people, and they are almost afraid to hold a client accountable. Like, hey, you have to show up for an hour every 2 weeks. Otherwise, the content is not going to go out, or it's not going to be good enough. I could do research from the internet and write a random article, repurpose it, and be like, hey, this is your post. I just don't operate that way. And it's so simple, and I just don't understand why people get this wrong. The only way to create good content is if it's completely unique to you. That is it. Now, you might ask me, okay, how do I create content that is unique to me? If you're doing it yourself, then that's no issue. You write your thoughts, what you have, right? If you know how to do it. But if you're outsourcing it or working with somebody like me, then my job is not to write. Anybody can write these days. AI can even wrap up a draft that's good enough that you can alter and use it as content. My job is to ask you the right kind of questions so that you can take out your genius out of your head into content. I was recently hosting an agency founder based out of the US on my podcast, and he said, I'm a genius in my head. Like, he was talking about himself. He is like, I have this amazing experience, 10, 20 years, let's say, and I know everything. But when I sit down to write things, I'm like, how do I do this? I know everything, but I just can't put it out of my head. So what my unique value proposition is, I ask you the right kind of questions so that I can bring your genius out of your head, only with a 2 hour commitment. I've seen how agencies work. I've seen how agencies are afraid of holding clients accountable. When I work with clients, we sign a contract or whatever, there's a bold line in there. The 1 hour commitment every 2 weeks is non-negotiable. If you cannot do it, we cannot work together. If you can do it, I can promise you, you'll create great content that is completely unique to you and your thought leadership. So I hope that answers your question, because to me, it's a very simple. People overcomplicate it for absolutely no reason, in my opinion.
So, talking about the agencies that don't make these requirements with clients, well, why do you think they pussyfoot around and they don't hold clients accountable?
Because they're afraid that they're going to leave, like, as simple as that. Every client relationship that starts, it needs to be starting with clear-cut expectations. Hey, this is exactly what I expect out of you, and this is what you can expect out of me. Non-negotiables, and then with respect, these are the boundaries that we're not going to cross. And if you're okay with it, we can work together. A lot of times, I mean, I'm sure you understand this better than me. You've been in the game longer, and you understand this. I'm a new business owner. I'm like not even an infant. I'm nothing. But when you are scaling an agency, or when you get the dopamine hit of signing a new client, you want that happening every single day. I've personally experienced this. When I sign a client, the next day I don't feel good, because I'm like, I want that rush again. I want somebody to be like, yes, let's work together, send me the invoice. So for agencies, I assume, I'm not that experienced, you're more, signing clients and scaling is a major priority, because that is exactly how businesses generate revenue, pay their employees. That is everything. But in terms of that, if you cannot afford to choose who you work with, you can end up working with people who you're not going to be able to generate results for. They're not going to be happy with the service because they don't have the time, or they cannot commit to the way you work. But you'll be like, well, worst case scenario, we work together for 3 months. Even if we don't generate results, they're still going to pay us for 3 months, and we'll take that. because you're an agency, you have people, you need to pay them, you need to scale, whatever. So I think that is exactly why it happens. We're almost too afraid to piss people off because we don't want them to leave us, or we don't want them to not pay us. Money is attractive. Money is everything to almost everybody out there, Joe. So if somebody's like, hey, I'm going to pay you 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 pounds a month, even though subconsciously or even consciously, you know that they're not a good fit, you'll be like, I'll take it because it's money. But I think it's not sustainable, and you will have like crazy churn. I don't know, I'm new, but this is my mindset. And I think this is exactly how I run my own business as well. Even though we're small, we're like 5 clients. But I know that the people that I'm working with, I can actually make a difference in their businesses because I know they're willing to commit. So if they're willing to commit, that means I can produce results for them. If I can produce results for them, that means that it actually moves the needle for them. They're actually going to generate business. So that is how I operate.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. And but I think this, I kind of take the premise at times of unless someone is glaringly not a good fit on your your initial meeting and conversation, then I'll discard them. I've had clients who I've kind of I've been a bit 50-50. I'm not too sure if they're going to achieve results, and they've absolutely blown it out of the park. And I think
Really?
a lot of that for me comes down to their willingness to actually play their part. You can do everything you've agreed. And I've had it with clients where they expect you've agreed to do this, they've agreed to do this, it's 50-50, but then they're expecting you to do 80-20, and then there's no results, everything's stagnating, and it's a kind of a he says, she says game. And then I always find the relationship's done when you have to quote the agreement, where you're having to turn around and
Yeah.
say, yeah, well, we agreed to do A, B, and C, not D, E, and F, all the way down to Z and X. So it's figuring out this dichotomy between you and the client, and making sure that I always find, and probably one of the strongest things that I've learned in the nearly 7.5 years now of running my agency, but it's the expectation management at the start, and it's just having very hard conversations in black and white, saying, hey, this is the agreement. For instance, one of our partners that we've been working with now for probably the last 2 years, we just had to state to them, like, we're signing a new agreement. We've had, I mean, generally it's fine with them, but we've had a few complications, and I just had to say, hey, look, if ever you want to pause what we're doing, we require 30 days notice before the next contract or the next payment is due. And it's just because that's come from, and you're trying to be flexible with people, you're thinking about business in the sense of game theory, whereby you want to play a continuous game. And I always find one of the best quotes that I try to work by in business is from Naval Ravikant. He says, play long-term games with long-term people, and if you wouldn't do business with the person for the rest of your life, don't do business with them for a day. And I think when I look to bring people into my team or even work with people, I think of that alignment massively. So you're 10 odd months into running your business.
Yep.
What books would, if you read a books, podcasts, resources, would you recommend to listeners here?
I I don't read books. Like, no, I've read like 5 or 6 books throughout my life because I don't know what, but I just can't stick to it. I don't know. I don't understand, but I do. There's one podcast that has heavily influenced my career in marketing in general since I changed careers back in 2022 from engineering to marketing. And that was Chris Walker and his podcast. And I think now it's called Revenue Vitals, if I'm not wrong. Chris Walker is, I would say, in my opinion, the marketer for today's day and age. He runs his own business back in the US, marketing agency, and I think he's like at the top of the food chain right now. The way he creates content and the way he talks about marketing, he just does not give a crap. His opinions are so bold and they make sense as well. He's basically against the status quo of marketing, the playbooks that have been used for the past decades. He's against it because he said, well, it's not working anymore, clearly. And for example, a website is going to say, well, your attribution is going to say Google was the last touch and Google is why your customer converted. In reality, there were so many touches back then. There was dark social. There was stuff that you can't even track. And then you were like, hey, the website's converting. Let's pour more into it. In reality, it's completely something else, right? It could be a LinkedIn presence, it could be something else. For example, so I absolutely love Chris Walker. I think you should definitely, whoever's listening to this, should check out his podcast. I think it's called Revenue Vitals, if I'm not wrong. They had rebranded, but it's completely full of knowledge. It's golden. I would definitely recommend that. And it has had a huge impact on the way I approach marketing as well.
Cool. I've never heard of Chris Walker, so I'll definitely look into him personally. Is there any other, what, are there any other people online who you take great inspiration from in business, but not specifically marketing? Because I love talking
Okay.
about marketing, but what my real passion is just general business. That's the thing
Okay.
I could take talk days for.
I have, I obviously do look up to Sam Minsbury because I worked with him for 2 years and I've seen how he handles business. I've learned a lot from him in general on how to run a business, you could say, even though I'm like solo right now, but I know like I already have a few pointers when I'm going to scale in the future because I've learned from him how to deal with people, how to deal with your team, how to grow your agency, what happens if clients are leaving, what happens if you're getting more clients, how to push back to a client, etc., etc. So I think Sam's a huge inspiration. I'm not gonna lie. Um, then Marvin, the guy I originally worked with, based out of Berlin, he's an inspiration as well. I believe each and every person that I've worked under, even my last role based in a Dubai agency, her name is Sabina Kuhn. She's the owner of that agency. Even though it was a short term, but I've still learned a lot from her as well. So these people have had major influences on the way I think about business or think about an agency right now. And I think I'm definitely gonna deploy the tactics that they were using in their business personally as well. I think that pretty much sums it up.
And if you take a lesson from each of them, what would you say the biggest lessons, or one biggest lesson you took from each of those people?
Interesting question. From Sam, it would be professionalism. Sam never, I don't know if you can curse or not, but Sam never lost his shit. Even if he did, he was so professional to clients and to the team as well that you would just be like, nothing's wrong. But he just knew how to do it, right? So that is definitely something I'm taking from him. From Sabina and Samantha, they were co founders. They kind of taught me how to have hard conversations with their team because when they wanted to talk about something, they would talk about something, right? Stuff that I initially thought was maybe too aggressive or maybe you shouldn't do that. As a leader, I think you do need some level of uh, some positive aggressiveness, if that even is a term. But from them, I learned that. I realized how to be a better leader, you could say. From Marvin, I think in general, he just made it fun, to be very honest. The way he run his business and the way he writes his content, it's never too serious. It's so lighthearted, but at the same time, you know that Marvin knows his stuff. So from him, I learned how to find the fun in it and how to actually enjoy what you're doing and be more passionate about it.
Mm-hmm. Cool, I feel you. And taking those lessons from the three of them and everything else that you've learned, because I don't think you just take inspiration from people, you take experience from what you've learned and you're learning. What's kind of the vision that you have for your business now?
Yeah, so right now we're at 5. I think I'm gonna be solo till 10. And once I do reach that, I am going to hire people because one, I want to be able to provide for people through my business. It's a scary feeling as well when you onboard somebody and when you start paying them that they get their hopes up, and because you're literally their livelihood now, you're paying them. So I want to be able to do that for my country. After that, I was actually recording a podcast recently here within Pakistan. He's a big creator here. He's getting a lot of money and he's out there, he's doing a lot of things. But when I spent the day with him for the podcast, I realized I I didn't want to do that, even though he was skating fast. But it seemed like he didn't even have a single minute for himself or even for his family, you could say. And I don't want to be doing that because I have to go back to the main reason why I wanted to start my own thing, because I wanted financial and time freedom for myself and my family. So yes, I want to scale. Money's attractive. I want to be able to build something nicely, potentially sell it in the future. I don't know. The possibilities are endless. But I don't want to do it at the expense of time spent with family, like primarily. That is my main reason. because as I said, it stems a lot from my father. So that is still the core reason of why I'm doing everything. In terms of my agency, I'm going to be able to scale hopefully very, very soon. And I'm going to be hiring soon this year as well. But yeah, man, it's when I think about it, I get a bit emotional as well because I have to go back to the main reason why I started doing this. I love when people do great things and they scale agencies to a million a year, etc. But I don't know if it's for me, to be very honest. I just want to be able to spend time with my family and travel the world so that I have enough money to do that. And that is really it.
Do you know, I think that's commendable. And I think there's this online world where the bigger the number you talk about, the cooler you look. And a lot of it is just a status game to feed your ego. If, if I remember reading this quote very recently, and it said, would you rather be known as the world's best lover, but you're actually the worst lover in bed, or be known as the world's worst lover and be the best lover in bed? And fundamentally, one answer talks about status and how you're portrayed, and then the other one looks at, well, what actually matters to you? Like, for, what the money you have in your bank account, the money I have in my bank account, the money that Elon Musk has in his bank account, it doesn't. I don't give a shit what Elon Musk has in his bank account. It doesn't impact me in the slightest. It doesn't change my life. What you have in your bank account doesn't change my life. And I think there's this game on, especially LinkedIn. I get quite bored of it, being very
Oh, yeah.
honest, because I feel like it's a bit of a dick swinging contest. It's just I've done this with my business, and I've done this. So, well, what are you doing it for? But I think if you truly understand what you're doing for, if that's to spend more time with your family, then that's really a game that matters a lot more than saying, oh yeah, I scaled my agency to this and I was able to do this, and it's, oh man, you're smashing it. I think maybe with age I've got to the point where I really don't care what most of these guys are doing, and that's what I said to you before at the start of this podcast is I'm not running this podcast to turn around and have this as a PR stunt for you. If you want that, then cool. There's another 20 podcasts down the line that you can do that on, but actually having real in-depth conversations is more important.
Yeah.
Just to wrap things up, curious, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self right now?
To my 20-year-old self, I would tell that guy to start building your online presence in a professional way because I've wasted so much time. So whatever I've done today, it's because of my personal brand that I've built online. I was always good at face-to-face communication. Even when I was back in Istanbul for my master's degree, I would be good with everybody. But I think this being more intentional with it, I think a bit of context is important. Here in Pakistan, I go to universities, I visit them, I talk about LinkedIn and how to build your online presence. And this is exactly what I tell them, Joe. I said, when I stumbled upon this personal brand thing or professional personal brand thing, I was 27. Now I'm almost 30. So when I go to universities and I see these students that are 18, 19, 20-year-olds, I was like, I wish there was somebody who guided me and told me, hey, build your presence deliberately in a professional manner on this platform. It will change your life. And I think that is exactly what I would tell my younger self. You think that you're going to be professional later down the line, but the sooner you start, the better it's going to be for you. So build that presence and be in front of the right kind of people. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
So man, and I think what you said that there's no better time to start than now. So there you go. Where can people find you?
They can find me on YouTube. You can search Ghalib Hassam, Ghalib Hassam. I post videos about personal branding and I run my podcast over there as well. They can also mainly find me on LinkedIn, Ghalib Hassam, Ghalib Hassam. So yeah, these are the two main channels that I'm at.
Cool, man. Well, we'll put links into everything within the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you.
Lovely, man. Take care.
You too, Joe.